Hello, my name is Vinay from Section-19 and I have disassembled this radio. So it is basically can play radio as well as it can play tape cassettes and also record those things. So it has two modes you can see, tape mode and radio mode here. So by up, moving the switch up or down we can change its modes. So now let me switch on the power. Now this you can hear the song. From here we can change the channel and we can tune it more accurately by this fine tuning. Now you cannot see any antenna here. Uh, that's because the radio is very old and the soldering between the wire and the antenna got loosened, so it stopped working. So I removed it. So this was the place where antenna was coming from, where antenna was coming out. So instead of that, I have extended a wire. Let me show you how the antenna look. So this is the compressed form. So by pulling it, we can stretch it out. So this is the full length of that antenna. So you can see that the end is very rusty. It loosed the soldering, and I don't have that device in my home right now, and it is lockdown situation. That's why I replaced it with a wire and extended it uh, to my window. So I can catch good amount of connections from here. Now I will explain you how this audio cassette player works. So by pressing this switch we can open up its door. Now we can place an audio cassette inside it and then it will play. So I will explain how this internal things works in a later part, but first of all I will explain you how the audio cassettes exactly look like. So here are a bunch of few audio cassettes. So let me open one of them by unscrewing them. Now I will explain about how this audio tape works. So I have opened it. So let's see. So basically this reel is actually magnetic in nature. So when I will take this magnet close to it, it will attract it. So this this upper layer of this reel is actually made up of ferric oxide and the bottom layer is made up of some uh, flexible plastic. So this ferric oxide is paramagnetic in nature and that's why it stores magnetic information in it permanently. So whenever we are recording something, then the audio is converted into electrical impulses, and due to that, some variation in magnetic flux happens in the electromagnet, which actually then writes it accordingly. And whenever we are playbacking the same tape, same cassette, then due to this variation in magnetic information, different kind of electrical impulses are generated, and that produces different kinds of audio. Now this is that electromagnet which actually reads or writes the magnetic information in the magnetic reel. Now let's understand how these other parts of the audio cassette works. We can see that there are two rollers which rolls in such a way, which they rotates in such a way that there is always some tension in this magnetic strip. So basically this strip from these rollers passes through these two spools, and in middle there is a sponge-like structure. So this strip passes over this sponge-like structure. Now we can see a metal-like chip. This chip basically lies in the middle, but I have displaced it so that I can explain this part clearly. This chip is made up of uh, ferromagnetic alloy. So whenever this strip is passing over this thing, then there is an electromagnet above it which reads this strip, and we don't want that those electromagnetic lines to read these information. We want those electromagnetic lines to read only whatever is above this sponge. We don't want that electromagnetic lines to get interfered with these information. Otherwise, the sound which we are hearing will get messed up. So that's why this chip is very important. Now let's look at this sponge-like structure more closely. So this structure basically applies upward pressure on the reel which is passing over it, so that there can be a we can maintain a close distance between that reel and the electromagnet above it. So that's why it is very important. If we don't take this structure, if we remove this structure, then we cannot listen to the audio properly. It will be very faint. Now let me explain some another parts of this audio cassette player. As I already said that this thing is a electromagnet which actually reads the magnetic information of the tape. Now this part which you are seeing erases the tape when we are recording audio in it. So this actually was horizontal, just like this electromagnet. It was horizontal, but since it is very old, this part has been broken and it is now slightly tilt. Things these two rotates and it rotates the rollers of the tape, and this needle like thing which you are seeing is called capstan, and this this roller, it is rubber, it's made up of rubber, it is called pinch roller. So what happens that the reel passes in between these two things. So when this roller applies more pressure upward, so at that time the tape moves slowly, and when the pressure is released a bit, or we can say if the pressure is less, then the tape slides between them faster. So in other words, we can say that the pressure applied by this pinch roller determines the speed of tape. Now let's disassemble this radio, but
Let me take out this power switch. But before separating these two speakers, let me take out the wires from this main component. You can see that with I am just pulling it down, and then the wires are getting out of it. So now wires has been removed. So now let's remove the speakers. So I have completely separated these two speakers. Now you can see this main component. So now we are going to remove. Now I have successfully removed all these screws. So let me open it up. Took the screws and took both the things apart. So this is the compartment where we can put batteries, or if we do not have any electric supply, we can use batteries.
this vertical plate, right? So I will remove the screws from here and here so that I can show it horizontally. So I have loosened it. So here is one and here is the second one. You can see both are loosened. Now you can see this plate horizontally. So here we got these four things from which we can take out speaker wires. And and then we have all kinds of capacitors and resistors. So this mechanism allows us to change the mode. We can push it upward and make it tape mode, or we can push it downwards and make it radio mode. And this thing which you are seeing is actually a mic which captures audio so that we can record it. Now we will see that what we have got in this mode. Since the board is very old, so I am not taking the risk of removing the screws because the connections may get loosened up, and then I will have to repair it from outside. So now this thing which you are seeing is actually uh, internal AM antenna. The external antenna is used to capture FM waves, but when we are listening to AM waves or MW waves, then the external antenna is not at all useful. Then we need some other antenna. So this is that internal AM antenna. We have got an magnetic core. Now this thing which we are seeing is actually variable capacitor. We we can rotate this with certain mechanism, and then the value of capacitance will change. So accordingly change channel. We can change channel with the help of this. When we rotate this tuning disc, when we rotate this disc, this internal gear also starts rotating, and that changes the capacitance, which helps us to change the channel. So we can see that as I rotate this gear, this gear also rotates. And this FM tuning helps us to achieve more accurate tuning. Here is that fine tuning gear. We can see that there are many capacitors. We can read that it is written some microfarad. Here also some microfarad. That means these all are capacitors. Now this thing which we are seeing is a mechanism with which we can change the uh, modulation. Like we can either make it FM, or we can make it MW or SW1, SW2. So accordingly it changes the antenna also. If it is FM, then we will use external antenna, and MW, then we will use the internal antenna. Now this thing which we are seeing is basically a transformer. So from here the AC voltage comes, which is whose RMS value is 220 volt. So this transformers decreases that voltage such that the delicate parts of the circuit can sustain those things. Now this button which you are seeing helps us to open this case. Inside it there is a cassette. So I will show you how internally these buttons work. You can see these things which you are seeing, actually they get pressed by these button like things. Whenever we press a button, these vertical things press these things, and then some mechanism things happen. But I cannot show you because this motor, uh, the wire which gives power to this motor got loosed, got disconnected. So I cannot show you by operating it. So these wires basically give power to this motor, and this motor then gives rotation or torque to talk to bunch of other disks or gears. So we can see that it is 9 volt counterclockwise DC. So we can see that these elastic strings which gives torque to these disks. So what I understood is that this motor gives torque to this disk and then this disk gives torque to this one. You can see that. You see, whenever I push any button, accordingly some function happens. So these are, with the help of buttons, these extensions get pressed. We can see that whenever we press a switch, that's how these things get pressed. So I have marked this group and